Hello, artists. It's Kelly Folsom here. I want to welcome you back to another podcast episode of Art Life Conversations. Today, we're talking about a very critical subject, and that is on the topic of resistance. And I want to share with you, first of all, what I see resistance as, and most importantly, tips, things that the main thing I've learned about overcoming resistance. Okay, so you may or may not have read, what was it called? Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art. I read this book years and years ago, and Stephen Pressfield was going on and on about resistance. And at the time, I was like, I don't know what resistance is. I don't know what he's talking about. Um, and I understand it now. So at the time, my level of consciousness was just not there to where I could really understand what he was saying. This was in my early days of being an artist. The thing that I did not like at the time, and that I still kind of don't like it, is at the time when I was reading the book, and I'm sure that I had my own misunderstandings and my own misperceptions at the time reading this book, but my feeling at the time was like, oh, resistance is kind of this big bad wolf, like resistance is the enemy. And I guess in a way, whenever we look at resistance, I guess we can see it as the enemy because it does keep us from getting to the next level of growth or from doing the thing that we say that we want to do, right? So we could visualize it, we could, make it into kind of this big, thing to overcome. Even the title of this podcast, How to Overcome Resistance. We can definitely do that. We can look at it that way. We can personify it that way. We can perceive it that way. And at the same time, from my experience, what I've learned now, 15 years later, since first reading that book, is like, it's not helpful for me to do that. So let me kind of lay out, if you are having any questions about like, well, what are you meaning by resistance? What is resistance? Resistance looks like whenever we say that we want to do something or we have a desire to do something, but then maybe you're finding yourself procrastinating, avoiding. Maybe you're finding yourself thinking about doing it, but then you just go on with, whatever else is easier for you to do that day. Resistance can look like, you're in progress, you're in process, you're making your art, maybe you're putting your artwork out there and you're getting maybe some feedback that is not pleasing to you. Maybe people are criticizing your art. Maybe you're getting rejected from shows or from galleries or from, maybe people are not responding to your work on social media, for example. Maybe people are not buying your work, for example. So sometimes resistance can also be like caused because you are trying to like do the damn thing, right? Like you're trying to grow, you're trying to apply yourself, you're trying to grow your skills, you're trying to develop your voice as an artist, you're trying to do the courageous, brave things. And sometimes things happen, always things happen along the way. We all get feedback along the way. And sometimes whenever those things happen, then that creates resistance within us, right? So it can either be because of something that has happened that's creating the resistance, or it can just be that you're just experiencing resistance, period, full stop, right? But basically it looks like, you say that you want to do something, but then you're not doing it, okay? I'm sure that all of you maybe can relate to that and have experienced that. Or when you go to do that thing, you're feeling a lot of kind of maybe some inner turmoil whenever you go to do that thing, or you're just feeling resistant. You're feeling like, oh, I know I want to do this, but I don't want to do this, is how I could best describe it. So I used myself last week as an example in my mastermind mentorship program. And I just said to my masterminders, like, I experience resistance every time I go to film podcasts. And I just said it matter of factly. And they were like, oh, but we love your podcast. And I'm like, yes, I know. And I will sometimes, not always, but I will sometimes feel resistant around that. And there's, in the moment, it brought awareness to me like, oh, okay, I am feeling resistance around, filming my podcast. So there's two ways that you can deal with resistance. And one way is to basically force yourself to do the damn thing anyway, even though you're feeling resistance. And that is an option. Okay, it is an option to just go, just Nike, just do it, just put on your big girl panties and follow through and do the thing that you said you wanted to do. That is an option. And for many, many of my beginning years, that is what I did. I would see that as kind of forcing your way through it. All right. And sometimes, depending on where you're at in your level of consciousness or your development, that may be what you have to do. Right. And that's totally fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And it is, I think, in my opinion, not necessarily the easiest way to deal with with resistance, right? It's not necessarily the way of ease and grace and flow to deal with resistance. And sometimes that's just what you have to do. So using myself as an example with filming podcasts, I know that once I start making my list of things that I want to talk about, and once I hit record and I start talking, I will actually then, of course, like get into the flow, right? I'll get into the flow. I'll start having fun. I'll start getting energized about what I'm talking about. And the resistance does melt away at that point. So it would be very similar, like if you're finding yourself resisting painting, right? I'm sure you probably have experienced this many, many times where as soon as you just start like putting out the paint or just make like one, even if it's just like toning the canvas or, just getting rid of that blank canvas, right? Because a lot of times resistance happens like at the start of something before we're about to do something, right? And it's like this kind of internal resisting of it, like, I don't want to, kind of thing. And so I'm sure you probably have experienced that where if you kind of force yourself just to make the first brushstrokes or put the paint out on the palette or tone the canvas, you probably have experienced that resistance then starting to melt away as you begin to work, as you begin to create. Okay. So that is one solution, one way of dealing with resistance. Now, the reason why I prefer this next solution is because with this next solution actually comes, understanding, So years ago, whenever I was in art school and I was experiencing massive, massive resistance, but I had signed on the dotted line to commit to 4 years of this art school, to go into $100,000 worth of student loan debt. I knew that I could back out if I wanted to, but I would feel like a quitter. I would feel like a loser, like a quitter. And I really wanted that degree. I felt like getting that degree was going to help boost my confidence, my sense of self-worth, my sense of self-esteem. And so at the time, that's why I was so committed to getting that degree, even though it just terrified me to do this, to go to art school, to change my life at 30 years old, go to art school and try to do this thing of becoming an artist. And every single week, I would be scared. I would be facing massive resistance, but I had kind of forced myself through the resistance by committing, making a huge time and financial and emotional commitment to getting that degree, right? So another example of like kind of using like an external force, right? Kind of forcing yourself through the resistance. Um, but every week I would pop in this CD by Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And thank goodness for Susan Jeffers, because, you know, that was like probably my first personal development CD I'd ever bought because I knew that I remember going to Barnes and Noble and going, I've got to get something to help me. You know, I'm so scared that I've made this decision and this commitment, and my gremlins were like kind of going crazy right inside of me. My inner critic, my self-doubt, and all of that is resistance. Okay, so that's what's underneath the resistance is the self-doubt, the fear, you know, the fear of like, what's going to happen? You know, are people going to judge me? Am I going to fail at this? Am I going to suck at this? So always underneath the resistance is some sort of like fear-based, I am not enough, I am not good enough, I'm afraid I'm not going to be good enough kind of emotion and thought. But, you know, now looking back years later, so I would listen to that CD and, okay, feel the fear and do it anyway, feel the fear and do it anyway. And again, that's kind of like that force yourself through the resistance, right? Like just acknowledging that you're afraid. Okay, I'm feeling the fear, and then I'm going to go do the thing. But I think that there is an important space between the feeling of the fear and the doing it anyway, right? And I think there's a really important space that is in between those two things, a space of being, a space of beingness and just being with it. And that space, feeling the fear is one thing, feeling the emotions in our body or feeling whatever we're feeling in the moment is one thing. But I think the next step before we actually do the thing that I believe is really critical and it makes it so much easier to overcome that resistance, and really the resistance just melts away, is to bring awareness to it, to bring awareness to what is underneath that feeling, what's underneath the feeling of the fear, what's underneath that resistance. You know, what am I really thinking and believing about this situation? And sometimes I think we can be afraid of looking at those things. We're maybe afraid that if we look at them, that then they'll just, you know, take over, you know. And I think it's quite actually the opposite. The opposite tends to happen if we can look at what's underneath the resistance, and if we can give it words, right? Not just feelings, but also like words, or if we can name it, you know, if we can allow, you know, kind of that inner gremlin, so to speak, that inner fear-based voice, inner critic, or what have you, if we allow it some space to actually be heard and to speak, then that allows for the awareness to come into place. So that then we can, you know, bring awareness to it and say, and question it, right? Like, and choose. So creating the space, like, for example, but I'm just going to use myself as an example with podcasts. When I really gave some space to look at, get curious about without self-judgment, without, being hard on myself, just going, oh, okay, yeah, that is curious. I wonder why I am feeling resistant. Why do I feel resistance around doing my podcast? Okay. And whenever I gave space to that voice, the little gremlins are like, oh my gosh, does this even matter? Does anybody even care? Are you even making a difference? I don't know what to talk about. People are going to think you're weird because this isn't the kind of stuff that artists usually talk about. So you can either journal this out or you can just like speak it out loud. And a lot of times we're afraid that that's going to give it more power, but actually what it does is it actually disarms it and disempowers it. And you can just meet yourself there with compassion, and understanding and be like, okay, cool. Yep. I know. I hear you. I hear all of those things. And, they're all legitimate fears and thoughts. And I know that you've got, this fear of like being criticized or being rejected or not doing good enough or not being perfect enough or not doing it right. So it just allows you to give space for what actually is underneath that resistance so that you can then, choose from that place of empowerment. You can disempower like the little gremlins. And even the word gremlins, I think, again, it kind of makes resistance out to be this big bad wolf. And I guess in a way, like I say, I guess it kind of is in a way because it's a form of self-sabotage. For most of us, most people are not going to be able all the time to force their way through the resistance and just do it anyway. So for a lot of people, a lot of us, it'll just be like you're just kind of stuck in this loop of resistance. So that's why I'm in favor of this way better. You may have heard the saying, I know it's from a very, older popular psychologist, but I can't remember who now, but the saying, what you resist persists. And that really is true. Like the longer you resist, you're resisting, and sometimes we're resisting that resistance, right? The longer we can actually stay trapped kind of in this self-sabotage loop where we're dealing with all of this kind of inner turmoil, but we're not actually taking the time and creating space to actually shed some light on it. And so we're walking around with all this baggage and all this like inner turmoil, but then because we're not resolving it, then we just keep, avoiding the thing that we actually want to do, that the resistance is trying to stop us from doing, right? So what it looks like to choose again, right? It looks like to create from an empowered space is, for just using myself as an example, is like, oh, okay, is that really true? Is all of that really true? Like 100% matter of fact, beyond a shadow of a doubt true, those thoughts and those beliefs? And are those the thoughts and beliefs that I want to choose to believe in this life, right? Or is there something more empowering that I want to choose to believe in this life? Who do I want to be in my own story, right? Who do I actually want to be in my own story? Right? Because the resistance it's a part of my life, right? It's a part of all of our life as human beings, but it's not the full picture. It is a very narrow picture, actually biologically, whenever animals are getting chased, right? Whenever they are running for their lives, literally, biologically, what happens is they stop being able to see the full picture and their viewpoint narrows, right? So they can't, their peripheral vision shuts down, and they just start focusing because all they can think about is, how am I going to get away from this lion, right? I just need to survive, need to survive, need to survive. And that is the mindset that we're in whenever we are locked in resistance. We have a very narrow point of view, and we're just not seeing the full picture, right? And as as living creatures, we also have a lot of times that biological response, because resistance is based, what's under resistance is fear, scarcity mentality. It's a very protective mindset. So we also do the same thing. You probably noticed, you shutting yourself in more. You probably notice you trying to comfort yourself or trying to stay safe, but we just get a very narrow perspective. So if you can just make space in between the feeling of the resistance, first of all, just being aware that you are experiencing resistance, that you are feeling resistance, and then make space to bring awareness to all of it, to the bigger picture, right? So first, allow all the fear to come up, either journal it out, speak it out, whatever works for you, talking to a friend perhaps, but sometimes talking to friends and family members, they're going to be trying to come in and, tell you what to do and give you a bigger picture or whatever. And that's not always helpful, because for all of us, this is a journey that, we and only we can do for ourselves. We can get guidance, we can get support, and that's incredibly helpful. And like, I know that for me as a coach, as a mentor for artists, really the only thing that I can do for that person is to try to be able to guide them through the resistance, to pose questions, for example. So like one woman who I was recently working with in our mastermind group, she was saying, I'm feeling more pulled to do this thing over here. But I really want to be doing, I'm feeling more pulled to paint this, but I really want to be painting this, was I think essentially what she was saying. Just trying to like summarize it for you. And she was in resistance, experiencing a lot of resistance. And because she was experiencing resistance, she wasn't doing anything. She wasn't doing either one of those things. And so she wasn't painting this thing over here, and she wasn't painting this thing over here. Why? Because she was stuck in that loop of resistance. Okay. Happens to all of us. And so I asked her, well, does it feel good to resist this thing over here? Even though you're feeling pulled to do that. And she said, well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't feel good. I said, okay, well, what if you just accepted the pull to do this thing instead, and just allow yourself to feel the pull to do that, or to choose that, allow yourself to choose that over this. Does that feel better? Yeah, it does feel better. And so what happened was, is she was able to relax, right? And she allowed herself to go down this path and make this choice. And what happens is then we can relax, right? We get out of that like resistance mode, that survival mode, biologically and mentally. And then it's like, oh, all of a sudden the resistance melted away. And what was interesting was, once she actually chose to go down the path that she was resisting, she ended up choosing the other thing and got into flow, and got into painting this other thing, or this other way, much more in flow. So it was just really a beautiful, very simple example of like allowing the resistance to just melt away. So I can't say for sure exactly what was underneath the surface for her. It could have been, thoughts of like, but that's not really what I want to paint, but I feel like I have to paint that because I have more opportunities for that. Or maybe it's like, but I really want to paint this over here because that's, I want to be seen as this kind of artist, and I want to fit in as this kind of artist. I have no idea. I'm just throwing out hypothetical thoughts that, I know very well myself, things that are underneath the surface that come up, and they're usually things like that, right? So they're usually kind of like a fear-based kind of self-doubt. Am I making the right decision? Am I making the wrong decision? We get confused whenever we're in resistance. And so I hope this is helpful to you today. Speaking on resistance, I invite you to consider next time you are experiencing some resistance, just to pause, take a break, pull back, make some quiet space for yourself. Maybe break out that journal, and start writing about, what is underneath this resistance. Why am I avoiding painting or creating, even though I say that I want to? What is really causing me to feel this resistance? What's really creating, this friction and this kind of self-sabotage trap in my life? And just see what comes up for you. From that place, then you can decide, you can choose, do I really want to believe all these things, right? Or do I want to choose and believe something else? Okay. A lot of times what you'll notice whenever you're journaling this stuff out is that it's very self-protective. It's very, don't go out there, it's scary, kind of stuff that comes up. Or it's a very I don't want to say self-centered, it's very self-focused, okay? So, for example, and I'm not saying that as like, a bad thing necessarily, but just using myself as the example for the podcast recording, all of the thoughts that were underneath the surface when I really made space for them to be heard and to be seen in journaling, what I noticed was it was all very kind of all me focused, right? It was all me focused. Like, I'm scared. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to show who I really am. I don't want to really speak my mind. I don't really want to put myself out there in that way. This is just too much for me. I'm not capable of dealing with any feedback I might get. It was all very me focused. And whenever I was able to see all of that, and then I started challenging some of those thoughts and beliefs, I was like, no, that's not what I choose to believe. I choose to believe that my voice does matter, and that because what I'm talking about is different, that it's important, that it is going to speak to somebody out there, that it is going to be of service to somebody out there. That these are things that, I've gone through as an artist, things that I've learned, and therefore it's important for me to share that with other artists, right? Because I know if I went through it, they're probably going through it, right? And I choose to believe that life supports me with tons of ideas, and supports me with everything that I need, that I always have everything that I need, that I've always been enough and I will always be enough, and I am enough right now. And I choose to believe that I can do it my way, that I don't have to do it perfectly, right? I don't have to show up perfectly. I don't even have to be like all the other podcasters out there with all the special equipment and, all the things. Like, I choose to believe that what I do is good enough. That is good enough right now for me. And that is good enough right now for whoever is listening. So can you feel the difference there between those two? And then once I was able to make space for that, then it's like, okay, the resistance melts away. All right, I'm ready to do this now. I'm no longer in fear, because fear will block us every time, whether that's creating a painting or a sculpture or a drawing. And now I'm in a place of creation, right? I'm in a place of like, okay, let's do it. Let's do this. Let's freaking go. Let's freaking do this. Let's show up and shine, right? Like, let's show up and grow. Let's show up and expand. Let's rise up. Let's rise the hell up here, on this planet. Let's show up and be our best version of our best self today, and create something of value for ourselves and for others too. So you can hopefully see like the difference, the shift there. And here's what the thing that I know to be true, you guys. Whenever you know that you're good enough, when you know it in your bones, right? You're not going to feel that resistance. Like with painting, I don't feel resistance with painting. With teaching painting, I don't feel resistance with teaching painting. I might still get like butterflies in my stomach before I'm about to host a class or something like that. But I know now from all these years of, going through the resistance, right? There's no way around that. Like, you have to build up your knowledge and your understanding that you are good enough. Okay. But because now I'm on the other side in some areas of my life like that, there is no resistance. There's absolutely no resistance to doing a painting. It's like, if I want to do a painting, I'm going to do a freaking painting, and there's no fear behind it. And does that mean that I'm like, it's going to be perfect? It's going to be so freaking amazing? No, that's not what it means. It just means like, I'm comfortable with this now. I know that I'm good enough. I didn't say like, I know it's going to be perfect. I know that everybody's going to freaking love this painting. No, but I know that the right people are going to love this painting. And I know that whatever I do in this painting is going to be perfect for the moment. And it's going to be perfect for right now and for where I am. So hopefully trying to share some of these kind of more concrete examples, will give you more of a full picture of what resistance means, what it is, and how to allow it to melt away. And yes, if you need to force your way through it, then force your way through it. And what I invite you to consider is that eventually over time, you're going to also kind of, this is what happened to me, you're also going to kind of hit a block where you can't force it anymore. And you're still going to have to do like the inner work with the resistance to build up your level of safety internally, your level of belief in yourself, your belief in your calling as an artist or whatever it is that you do in this life, your belief in who you serve, and that how you show up and what you're here to do is perfect for right here and right now. Okay. I hope that that's helpful to you all. And thank you so much for following the podcast. I'd love to hear from you. Did this support you? Did you get it? Did it make sense to you? What has been your relationship with resistance so far? Do you feel like you have something now in your toolbox the next time you find yourself procrastinating, avoiding, those sorts of things? And I just want to say, like, those are all words for resistance. It's all resistance in disguise or in a costume or in a different word. It's all resistance. And I think instead of resistance being looked at as a bad thing, as a big bad wolf, it's really an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reframe your beliefs, to level up. It's an opportunity to be the creator of your life, be the hero of your story and not the victim. It's an opportunity to love yourself fully with everything, all of the thoughts and all the things that we all have inside of us, to bring awareness and acceptance to that humanness, the humanity that we are, right? And so that's really the space, I think, in between feel the fear and then do it anyway. It's like that human being, the beingness in between, right? Is the space in between that I think is so critical and so important. Okay, much love, everybody. I'm wishing you all happy creating, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.